So the Eat Like Ed thing, right, comes from, remember when, way back in the day, when we'd go to conferences and stuff, um, the I sort of developed a reputation in these conferences as, being able to find the little bits of food, right? Those little dives that have the really good food. And pretty soon I realized that, in my circle of people, I had kind of a following of folks that would say, okay, where should we go? And pretty soon everybody's going to these places, and they can't all be winners. So I had a couple where it's like, okay, you did okay, but didn't quite measure up. But for the most part, they did pretty well. So that's where the whole Eat Like Ed algorithm came from. And we'll chat a little bit about that. But the last minute adjustment that I did is I realized that rather than rebuild that, because it involves like some HTTP calls, maybe when we get into the bot building demo, depending on time, I might try something new. So we'll see how this goes. But anyway, thank you for being my beta audience for this presentation. We're going to give it a go and see how it goes, and hopefully it rolls along pretty well. It's been a while since I talked bots. I'm going to grab my high-tech pointer. Paid lots of money for it, so I should pull it out and use it occasionally. See, it's the one that lets me do this kind of stuff. So yeah,
Wow.
I know, right? It's
Wow.
there's all kinds of fun that I can do with it, and so the dashboard in the day, I had to do the same exact thing. I paused and told everybody, hang on, got to go get my pointer, because I keep forgetting, in this context, of working from home, that I can still actually use those cool tools. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Ed Gonzalez. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer and Microsoft MVP. I think the rules state that I'm supposed to mention that every 20 seconds. So let me know if I let that go too long without bringing that up. I am humbled and honored, by the way, to do that in the business application space. Have been for about 2-ish years, and I'm still kind of getting my feet under me. There's a lot of stuff about that. Been in tech for a long, long time, but mostly in not business application space. Started out, doing databasey stuff, reporting analyst, network hardware, working for VARs and selling stuff and talking to people and configuring. And then, recently, like in the last 10 years, got into actually probably the last 20 years. Wow. Wow, that goes fast. Got into the XRM space, and that kind of like led me down this other journey with the Microsoft stuff. I consider myself a polymath, which is basically, I think, a polite way of saying that I'm easily distracted. I know a little bit about a lot of things, including aviation science. I'm a student pilot, aquaponics, and then in my spare time, I like to foster orphan kittens. Um, Okay, and then try, fail, learn, repeat. That's kind of the mantra of my blog or my website, which is flyingpolymath.com. And then you can find me on Twitter at powered by EdG. And as far as the icons that went along with this, I will tell you, and anybody who knows me will find this funny. But all I did was I did a search for icons inside PowerPoint, and I just typed in the word, right? So I typed in try, and the first icon that came up was a dinosaur. I thought it was funny, ironic, whatever, and no offense directly to firefighters. But when I typed in fail, that's the one that came up. And the reason that's funny is because um, firefighters and I have some history, and they're not my favorite people, but I think that's just because I haven't met the right one yet. And then learn, obviously, and repeat. So those two seem pretty intuitive, but I just thought the dinosaur and the fireman was a funny kind of addition. Talking about the Power Platform, it sounds like we kind of touched on it a little bit, so hopefully I don't, get too deep into stuff that you guys already talked about. The big brush, talking about this in broad strokes, it's a series of low-code, no-code tools. I think they started out with a no-code brand and then quickly found out that that's not the case. It helps basically business users like me do some pretty cool things, right? There's a lot of cool things that the classically trained developers can do. I'm not one of those, but having the Power Platform available to me lets me do a lot of fun things, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But it starts by helping you automate some mundane tasks. Intended audience can range anywhere from people like me to people who are classically trained developers. I know a lot of really good devs that find some value in the Power Platform and have fun doing some stuff in there. Because of all the different connectors, I think we're beyond 300, approaching or passing 400 now. We're able to connect to a lot of different things, and that goes across the whole platform. The main point that I want to get across from this slide is it does require a different way of learning, finding information, and teaching. So, quick story, I go to a conference and I present a session on how to take an email and turn that into a ticket in Dynamics 365. Most people are going to check out because unless they need to do that very specific thing, they're not going to be interested. They're going to say, well, I don't need to do that, right? When the reality is with the Power Platform, we really want to kind of change the way of both selling and buying the information so that we're focusing on what I call the ingredients rather than the final dish, right? So in that same session, I'll cover how to use a trigger based off of the email, and then how to create a record inside Dynamics, and also how to update a record, how to find records, all that other stuff. And that kind of stuff might be interesting even if somebody's not in Dynamics. The logic's still going to apply to Salesforce, Sugar, whatever, right? So getting into the finer details of the Power Platform, like I said, it helps users like me build proof of concept or proofs of concept or proof of concepts. You figure it out. You put the S wherever you want, and it puts the power of the solution in the hands of those people closest to the problem. So the ones in the trenches that are facing the thing saves us having to draw up a scope, have a bunch of meetings, and have somebody else build what they think the solution is. It lets me just kind of build a solution, or at least a rough frame of that, and pass that on to somebody to make it real. Power Virtual Agents itself is using AI-based algorithms to understand and answer text voice from customers, both internal and external, right? Saves time and money while providing a more complete experience to users. This is great from an internal side. I can take something like an FAQ, dump that in there, and basically create a chatbot based off of that FAQ within a couple of steps, so that I can have an internal HR bot or something like that that answers those easy questions, freeing up those valuable resources to go do more important things, or more impactful or effective things, and then answering the things that get escalated because the chatbot can't really handle it or doesn't know how yet. That brings us to some of the Microsoft slides. Some complex challenges around chatbots is, the consumer, the people that are, whether that's internal, external. 66% try and use self-service rather than contacting an agent for assistance. That number is going to continue to climb as people get more and more familiar with platforms and how they work. 90% expect consistency and continuity across channels. So no matter how I contact you, whether it's through Facebook or your website or whatever, I want the same answer. I want the same style. And then finally, almost 60% of those channels are managed in silos, meaning they don't necessarily talk to each other, or the chat bots are distinctly different, right? Power Virtual Agents, the vision from Microsoft is they want to use natural engagement, meaning we're using naturalized words, natural language, that Lewis layer. I think maybe we talked about this a long time ago. Lewis is Microsoft's language understanding, and then IS, whatever that stands for. But that's been incorporated into a lot of things. If you use the Q&A feature inside Power BI, either on the dashboard side or building building a visual, that's using that same kind of natural language image or engine. And this helps push down the power of AI, or probably more accurately machine learning, into the user's hands, rather than having be behind the gates of IT or developers or things like that. gives us the ability to continuously enhance or make our bots smarter, and also lets us take action. So you think of their mantra of analyze, act, automate. That lets us cover or check boxes. So life cycle of Power Virtual Agent, stepping through creating the bot, building some topics, telling them to do things. So down the bottom right, we're talking about integrating the bot with backend APIs using Flow or Power Automate. So this presentation is brand new, and they're still calling it MS Flow. I think that means they want to rebrand Flow back to Flow instead of Power Automate. And so extend the bot with BF skills for complex scenario. I'm not sure if anybody has an idea what BF stands for other than boyfriend. Then we will insert that instead. And so we take our public bot to the boyfriend channels and then monitor the bot performance and improve. The boyfriend part might actually be the tequila. Any questions so far as I'm kind of trucking through? Somebody knows what BF is?
Bot framework, says Jamie.
Very smart. Thanks, Bastian. Yeah, good job.
Thanks.
I like boyfriend better.
To come up with it. Hey. Yeah, boyfriend, best friend. Yeah.
Whatever. I'm totally judgment-free zone here, so you get it all. Okay, so talking about the information architecture inside Power Virtual Agents, you get a set of 8 predefined system topics. Those are kind of showed over on the right. And it starts with, your conversation tree, which includes your trigger phrases. And those would be kind of like the same thing as synonyms for your tables or queries inside, or fields, sorry, rather, inside Power BI. So how many different ways can I ask that? And you'll see that when I go into the demo, when I talk about things like, where should I eat? I used things like, where should I have lunch, or what's for lunch, or what should I have for dinner, and different ways to approach that. And what that does is that teaches the system, or at least gets it down a path of figuring out all the different ways to ask for this thing. And then that way, when it recognizes something like that and scores it high enough down that conversation tree, then we start going down that path of answering that question. And then as we, build in a loop that basically says, did I successfully answer your question? That helps reinforce that, or make that we'll say that trigger phrase a bit stronger and has it score higher. You can also create your user topics, right? So you can have more of those. A lot of bots will have more than one topic, and you can actually thread between the topics, right? So I'll have my Eat Like Ed topic, right? Which is, that's one thing within a single bot. But then inside that single bot, I could also build in and this is my hope, if I can do this tonight during the demo, we'll see how that goes. But I'm going to on the fly try and build a, what's the weather kind of bot. And I can carry the conversation in between my Eat Like Ed and what's the weather thing, because as an example, in my Eat Like Ed bot, the very first question the bot asks is, okay, where are you? Or where should I look, right? And so I would type in a city name. It goes to Yelp, uses the API for Yelp, grabs, the top result and basically says, let's try this place, right? And it's just a super easy demo. And then if my follow-up question is, great, what's the weather? Then I wouldn't need to re-ask for the information of where you're at, because I would already know based on that. So Power Virtual Agents lets you do that. I don't know if I'm going to pull off that stunt tonight, but we'll at least, show you where all that stuff is located. Okay. I'm getting into my soapbox about the ingredients over recipes. So this is this is a session on how to take emails and turn them into trouble tickets in Dynamics. If I had a session that said how to make chickpea butternut squash curry, the people that would show up would be the exact number of people that want to make that same exact thing, right? But if instead I had a session that said how to use these ingredients to make something you love, and then I went into the flavor profiles of, garlic and onions and chili paste and, butternut squash and coconut and all the other things that are shown there. Then I'm approaching or appealing to a much wider audience, right? So the Power Platform works much the same way. it's not necessarily like when you see a session and you're seeing it in the sense of, what the title is, don't automatically write it off if that doesn't appeal to you, because chances are the person doing that is going to cover something that you may need to know, right? So they may cover how to do an update or how to do an HTTP post get whatever, any of those things that you want to do in the context of their own final solution. And that's kind of a carryover from how we used to present, right? So going back to whatever SharePoint or some of the older dynamic stuff, when we were solely focused on that stuff, we would say, here's how you build a workflow inside Dynamics 365. That was clear. It was relevant to the right audience. It made sure we got the right people in the seats. And it made sure that everybody that was in that room had an easy expectation of, or an easily set, a recognizable expectation of like what is going to be coming at them, right? That paradigm needs to shift completely with the Power Platform, because it's no longer about that final dish. It's really about the ingredients that go into that. And so I challenge not only the people that are going to the sessions, but the people presenting the sessions to rethink how they frame this stuff and to represent it in a way that seems to appeal to, here are the things we're going to cover, not here's the end product of what we're going to end up with. So here is kind of the origin story. I talked about this a little bit as far as what was driving the specific Eat Like Ed thing. And I'm going to plug a couple of blogs that I did that are kind of, they're on the older side, but a lot of them are still relevant. And it talks about the journey, right? So I talked about how I became that Eat Like Ed person. People wanted to know where I was going to go eat because it was always the place that wasn't a chain. It was usually pretty good, and it was usually pretty close. And it was off the beaten path. So a lot of times at these conferences, we end up in the touristy areas, right? And if you're in, I guess, in the Pacific Northwest, like McMenamins is a thing, right? Like you can't walk 50 feet without bumping into one of those, and they're all kind of like the same thing with Applebee's and whatever. And so I wanted to get away from that. I don't like that food. I want to get a taste of the city that I'm in. And so that's how I got into this, right? And so how this started was just me building a simple flow with initially it was just a manual trigger that would use an API to reach out to Yelp and then grab top 5 results. And then it got a little more complicated, but here is a quick link to that, and I'll drop all of these in the chat afterwards if y'all want them. But this blog talks about how I did that. Then things got a little more complex, and I had it interface with Teams, right? So now I'm meeting the user where they're at. And I'm using Teams as the go-between, and then Power Virtual Agents to control the conversation, right? To basically interpret what the user is saying and then turn that into a series of tasks inside Power Automate. Apologies for the older icons. I haven't updated these. And then it would do the same thing. It would go make the API call to Yelp and then return whatever I came back in adaptive cards inside Teams. And so it could all start with somebody in Teams typing the food bot, hey, food bot, where should I go for lunch, right? So a lot of stuff, and that's why I'm linking off to these other articles so you can kind of go chase those down. I don't want to eat up too much time here. I want to get into the demo. But the Power Virtual Agents, like as far as doing this, so my old presentation, I used another third-party bot service, excellent service, love it, priced very competitively. But there's some different steps because you have to capitalize on that Lewis natural language engine on top of the chatbot kind of interface that sends the information back and forth. And then on top of that, you have to build that Teams app. So that it required a couple of layers. With Power Virtual Agents, setting that up, Chuck Sterling and some of the other folks that would do the road show when this first came out said, right here, this is the hardest part. choosing a name for your bot, right, is like the hardest thing about this. And we'll talk about this as we kind of get into it on the demo, but choosing a name and then you wait and then you wait. And back in the olden days, you know, when this first came out, you waited some more, but now it seems to be cooking along pretty easily. And then you add your topic, right? And so your topic again is, you know, essentially the conversation tree or the path that you want to go down. What is the thing that's going to trigger this, which is the next phase, adding those trigger phases. So you can see here that I called this topic find food. And then my trigger phases are things like where should I eat? What should I have for lunch? Feed me and I'm hungry. And then, you know, there's some other ones in there that you can add in. Essentially the full circle, like going back to that one slide that had the big circle, right? Part of that was reporting. I think it was right around here. And that lets you look at the questions people were asking that weren't being answered, right? Hang on, the neighbor's kids are out. Let me close the window. So that lets you see, you know, what questions are people asking that aren't being answered, and then you can choose which topic they go into and possibly add them here, and or you can see, you know, hey, this, you know, somebody typed in something that was kind of like feed me. It scored pretty low on the thing. I'll add that as a trigger phrase so it'll score higher next time, right? Or if you see something getting hit a lot, maybe you add that as a trigger phrase, but that's part of the loop there, right? Next step is to author that journey. So this basically is the what do I do, right? And it can absolutely live just in Power Virtual Agents. It doesn't have to dip into Flow, but having it dip into Flow/Power Automate gives you the ability to reach into other data sources, pull out other information, have it do some other things. You know, you could have a chatbot that, you know, you say, set an appointment for tomorrow. Like essentially all of the things that you tell your home assistant, and whether it's Google or the other one that I'm not going to mention because she's right over there on my other desk, you can do with a chatbot, right? And you can do that in the same way to train this. So essentially, we're doing the same thing. We're creating those trigger phrases that basically, you know, light it up and say, okay, go do this thing, and then we're telling it what it can do. Okay, and then finally, you can publish and test, and they make it super easy. Back in the days when this first started, like getting this into like Teams was a thing. Getting this onto a website was a bit of a thing, right? If you've worked with the BF, the boyfriend or bot framework, you know, from let's say last year before, you know that it was kind of a thing to kind of get this stuff to show up. Now it's super easy. They give you the embed code to drop into a website and you're off to the races, right? Any questions so far? I'm moving along because I'm trying to race to the demo.
I don't see anything in the chat.
Oh, thanks for keeping an eye on that.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, so you and these 5 people here all want to see the demo. So that's what we're going to get. I have no idea who they are. They were just part of the slide deck, right? So let's get into it and kind of see what's going on. Let me drag this over here. Doop. And so we don't really need this guy. So here is the Power Virtual Agents, and I actually created a whole bot around Eat Like Ed rather than having topics inside of that. So I wonder if I can just, yeah. So here we can create a new bot, and we're going to call this one customer service, and inside that one we can you know, we can have things like the Eat Like Ed, which I'll demo from my other bot. But we can also have, in addition to the Eat Like Ed, we can have, you know, the weather one and things like that. So this may take a little bit more time. This was the part, the waiting that I mentioned. Oh, pretty quick. Okay. So we're going to skip the exploring bit. And so here you can see I've got my customer service bot, and then I've got my topics. You can see that there's a bunch here that are already there, right? So these are the 8 that that I talked about. They're kind of like your system topics. You can edit these. They recommend you don't do a lot of editing, right? So maybe you customize the greeting a little bit, personalize it, do something to get rid of the error that's up here. This might be because it's still provisioning the bot. It might also be because I was selfish and didn't sacrifice anything to the demo bot. So I'm going to just switch over to my other bot that I know is
Sacrificed your whole Wi-Fi now.
right. Right. Yeah, really? Don't I give credit to that? I don't think the demo gods prefer Wi-Fi, especially Wi-Fi that's slow, thanks in
Yeah,
Xfinity.
they
I think
love
they like
cable.
booze. Okay. So here you can see in this bot that's fully provisioned some of the other bots that I built, right? So here's a birthday bot that I made. And you can see that I had some fun with the trigger phrases. And the more you enter, so most of them have about 5 because that's like the minimum of what it says, right? It says start with 5 to 10 diverse phrases. Nothing gets more diverse than done, na, 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 they say it's your birthday. So you want to have a wide range of things that they're asking for. If I do a bunch of ones that are like, what's for lunch? Or I want lunch, or let's have lunch, the bot is kind of like, I get it. Anything that mentions lunch is going to go down this path, right? So if you go down, and you put a wide range of things here, that's going to make your bot a little more intelligent and at least a little more broader net as far as the thing that it tries to capture. Now, inside this canvas, right? So still following the pattern that all the other Power Platform has, I have the ability to just test my bot as I'm building it, right? So not only do I have, this quick start stuff and all the standard dashboard stuff from my home screen, I've got, all the learning path things. I can access all of the different bits that I can, build through here, even creating my own data entities from here, which I think is using Dataverse as the back end. Yeah, it looks like that. But I can also test it, right? So as I'm building something, I can say, I'm presuming that this guy's turned on, but let's say, where should I eat? If it's doing stuff, it says, where should I look? And so I'm going to tell it, I'm in Oregon, and I think it's going to hit me with batter up. Yep. So in this process, there's a couple of things going on, right? So I use this phrase where if we go to my eat like a bot, that's actually right there. So I would have scored 100% with that. But if I did something, let's see, that's not on this list, let's try lunch. If it triggers it, yeah, so it didn't trigger it. So that gives me an opportunity to make this a little bit smarter. You notice that none of my trigger phrases include the word lunch. And so now if I come in here and try it again, it's still not getting it. So if what did I say for lunch? Oh yeah, I did the same exact thing. So maybe it takes some time to kind of cycle through this and provision out. I don't know. Yeah, so demagogues are mad at me. But essentially what I would do is I would look at the report and I would see that somebody keeps asking this question and they're not getting this response. You'll notice that I have also built in a feedback loop that essentially gives people a chance to say, I like the experience, or enter a number. This was saying it didn't like this. Oh, I see. It asked for a rating. And I said, what should I have for lunch? So I obviously answered the wrong question. And so if I can see on the reports a series of low scores or a series of unanswered questions, a series of these things being presented, I can take a look at what the users are asking and make my bot a little more intelligent. Okay. So let's take a look at the authoring canvas. And that's kind of where you build the conversation, right? So the trigger phrases come up automatically. It looks like my lunch one isn't there, and maybe that's because I'm publishing. But the next step that I have is ask a question, right? And so you get to choose the data type here, and that was all under the different entities. And so it tries to find that in the same thing, to basically say, oh, okay, you're expecting a city here. So that's why if I did something like this, where should I eat? And I put in the zip code, it gets confused, right? Because I'm not giving it a city on my data type, I'm giving it a zip code. Now, if I just pass that through to my Yelp API, or excuse me, my Yelp API, Yelp would be totally cool with that. It'd be like, oh, I know what a zip code is, right? So you would have to, as you're building your bot, maybe have a couple of different paths and say, oh, are you handing me a zip code? Um, and then it would be able to pass that information along, right? So let's see. Let's see if I did anything.
Yeah, I had that question right there. You could do like, yeah, make different paths. I'm thinking if it's a five character thing with the zip code, right?
Yeah. So you could look at the response. Well, actually, I don't know because that validation is all happening within the single step, right? Um, so um, so I don't know if you could do that, but what I could do is say, have a button that says, "Do you want to look by city name or zip code?" Right, and then depending on what they select, like I could just push a button that says, "Do you want to look into?" Maybe we'll do that real quick. Let me test this. We'll make some changes and see what happens. Where should I look? I change that to zip code. Um, and let's try Hoffman Farm Store. So you can see that it's processing through and in real time, it's showing me what's working. So let's see if I can add a step in here. There we go. And so we're going to ask a question and how would you like to search? And so multiple choice options. It would be a pre-built string, which I think is pretty much what I want to use. And then, so my first option is going to be city name. And then new option is going to be zip code, right? And so here you can see, and then I have the option to change this to a different variable, depending on what that is, which would be text. So let's say they want to do it by zip code, right? Which is pretty much this path. Um, Interesting. So I was hoping that I'd just be able to drag this over and do that, but it's not letting me do this.
Do you
So
have to
we're going to flip
duplicate
it.
the rest of the path?
Well,
You have to,
I would traditionally, yeah. So what I would do is I'd have a thing that has this, say, where should I look? I wonder if I can bring it together, right? So, right, and then instead of zip code, I'm going to make this a city, and it's going to make that var city, and then I wonder, yeah, I was thinking I could bring this back, kind of like a tree to bring this back together.
mhm.
But instead I'd have to do a call to action and then, yeah. Okay, so interesting journey, right? So for those following along, my original kind of thought was maybe I could just bring this back over here because it's all the same, right? Doesn't really care. But it looks like I can't do that. But to answer Bastian's question, what I would have to do is essentially duplicate the rest of this journey and chase it down. So now what I would essentially do is I'm gonna freak it out a little bit because the way this choice is working is it's going to ask for city. Let me change this and see if it does it this way. City name. There we go. So now it's basically saying, okay, if it's equal to city name, I'm going to go down this path, and if it's not, it's essentially going to go down this path, right? So let's see how. No? Where should I eat? And so it should give me, okay. It should give me a choice. Nope, it goes right to it. Interesting. So it should ask me this first.
There's the question mark. Does that matter?
This one here? Oh, up
I
here,
think
you
it's what
mean?
you're. Yeah,
Yeah, no, it's there.
that's what you have.
I'm wondering,
Yeah.
oh, you know why? I didn't save it. Oh, save it as. So let's give this and kind of complete that circle, close it. So I'm saving it. It looks like it's kind of doing it. And that's probably what happened last time too. Let's see what happens if it throws up my choice. There we go. So how would you like to search? I want to do by zip code. And now it wants to know where I should look. So 97007. And there we go, Hoffman's Farm Store. So you can see that there's quite a bit of power without even leaving, Power Virtual Agents. It's not until I actually get to this action bit where I want to, go get some extraneous information. And what I'm doing is I'm going out to Power Automate, looking at a flow, and we'll look at the one that I've got, and then maybe we'll build a different one. And then returning some data, right? And when it returns that information, it says, let's try restaurant name. And obviously I can also send back, because it's just using JSON, I could send back the address, I could send back, whatever I want, and that would be there. Okay. So let's just keep saying yes and see what happens as I test things out. We got any questions on this stuff so far? What we got? Let me come over here.
We do have one coming from Giselle. Question is right here. We built out a virtual agent, but our
Yeah.
brand/legal team won't let us publish it until they can verify that it will speak in brand approved language to make sure that it's helping lock in our messaging. Do you have any recommendations on how to ensure that or address that concern? Or is there a way to pull all the language from all the topics so they can review it in one document versus pulling each topic individually?
That's an interesting question. I think from here, from the boyfriend composer, you might be able to get at that. And then also, yeah, if you were to go into the bot framework from the Azure portal side, you might have better access to that. You can see all of the trigger phrases, inside here going through one by one, but I can see that being kind of the issue. That's a great question, and I may have to dig in that. So in the presentation at the end of the PowerPoint, I do have the link to the documentation, so you can kind of chase that down as well and see what's there, what's going on there. And if you can export topic, yeah, I do think that topic by topic you can export. I think so, but I'm not certain. But it looks like Matt has a link to some documentation, and it looks like it's with respect to GDPR. So I'm not sure if it's basically focused on the privacy stuff. Don't know. But I think the bot framework side is probably going to give you more access to what you need. And then Pranam says, have I tried using Power Automate Desktop to test out different branching of the bot journey? I haven't spent a lot of time in Power Automate Desktop and in doing those UI flows. So the answer to your question is no. I don't know. Yes, that would totally work because you can call a UI flow from a cloud flow. But I'd be interested to see how that worked out and what the use case might be. So definitely something worth checking out. And again, going back to my slide, that's what makes this stuff so fun is you can have a cool idea like that and build up a straw man or a framework pretty easily that at least tests out the theory without dumping a bunch of time and money into it and say, you know what? Yeah, I can do this thing. Let's dig into it and find out, if I can actually make it do the thing that I want it to do, right? How are we doing on time? Are we okay?
We're good. We're good.
Okay. So then maybe what I'll do is I'll come over here to my original already provisioned bot, and then I'm going to do a new topic. And so this one we're going to do from scratch. We're going to say weather, and you can see I have an option to put in a friendlier name. So maybe this could be topic underscore. Right. And this is and here I can put into the description. And so here it gives me the opportunity to add in my trigger phrases. Remember, I want to get I want to get a wide range of things. And we want to give it as much information as we can. Temperature, is it? Right. So that gives us 5, right? And so let's save the topic as it is. And so I just clicked on, the authoring canvas. And so here's where it takes me. It starts with all of your trigger phrases. So just like Power Automate, it says, okay, I've started. I'm going to go do this thing. What's the very first thing that I should do? And so if somebody's asking what's the weather, obviously before I go find out the weather, we want to know where they would like to look. And again, that response, actually, we're not going to use the message. We're going to use something different. So I'm going to delete that, ask a question, and then now I would say, where would you like to? Message one is kind of like a one-way, hi, thanks for using the weather bot. What can we do? Pranam asked a good question as far as importing the trigger phrases. I don't know. I don't know. I'm going to go back and look at the chat, and then what I'll do is I'll find out the answers to these questions to let you know. I gotta think. I know for a fact. Okay, so I know for a fact that you can import like FAQs and things like that. But what that is that's one question, one answer, right? That doesn't give you the synonyms and all the different ways to ask the thing. So I don't know if it's doing anything other than laying over its regular natural language layer on top of that. Doing the normal synonyms for words, like sales revenue, things like that. But for your specific question, like let's say I had a list of synonyms and I just wanted to upload that. I don't know, but we'll find out. Okay, so I'm going to tell it to expect a city, and then I'm just going to keep that response as the var city, right? But I'm actually going to rename that to var city. Sounds okay. And then so now I'm going to go do the thing. They respond with, whatever city they're trying to look at, and I want to call an action. And so I'm going to create so here you can see I have the opportunity to choose all of the other flows, and all of these ones are basically they're inside a solution. So for me to use a flow here, it has to be inside of a solution. And so here you can see all I did was click on flow, and it's going to grab hopefully it's going to grab the input from var city and pass that through. This is new to me, but let's see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to add an action here, and then this, we're just going to go get current weather. And then hopefully this has a location thing. And let's see if I've got any, yeah, so I don't have the variables here. And so we may have to go over to the JSON inside my other one. This is new to me. All right, So I'm going to go to my other topic real quick so we can look at that. So here's my Eat Like Ed. Actually, we'll go to my solution.
I got a quick question. Can you grab somebody's IP address right away, like when they ask something?
If you grab it, if you're doing it from Power Apps, right? So I
Yeah.
know you can do that, or I don't think you can just go grabbing stuff without them knowing. They're pretty sensitive about that.
Okay. Yeah, I think I remember Brent doing something about that with GPS inside,
Yeah.
at least for power apps. Yeah.
So here's the interesting thing, right? So this is different than this one, because you notice that in my other one, I had the ability to have a schema, which I don't necessarily have right here. So I'm not sure how they're doing that now. So we'll stick with my Eat Like Ed one, and we'll just set the weather one aside, right? And then I'll send out an update once I have that. But in the Eat Like Ed one, I had the ability to set the schema, and so you can see that basically I've got this city name with a type of string coming through, and so that way when I came down to go get my Yelp results, right? So here's the HTML. I pay no attention to my key, but you can see that city name comes across as a dynamic value inside that, and so then I can set the other things inside my Yelp API. So I'm looking for $1 or $2 signs. I'm only grabbing the top one, sorting by rating, and then my radius in feet, which I think was like a quarter mile or something like that, or maybe a couple miles, I forget. And then the search term, which in this case was food. So if I wanted to, in my chatbot, I could say, what is it you want to look for? Lunch, dinner, things like that. And I could pass that through to my search term as well, right? Um, and look at that. Yeah. And so the location stuff, Jamie, go ahead and come off mute. Is it grabbing the IP? I knew we could do latitude and longitude, especially if they were doing a power app, because that would grab it from a mobile device, right?
Yeah, the link I shared is specifically GPS. So
Okay.
that's what it's doing. So that's what you know, and that's what I know. But I
Yeah.
don't know about the IP.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's what I thought. Because if you were doing this from mobile, just like with the Power app, it can grab the latitude and longitude from the phone's GPS, but I don't think it lets
Okay.
you just kind of yank the IP address. And even with the Power app side, you have to enable location sharing, and it comes up with that error that you're used to, right?
Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so with the like Ed one, I've got my JSON as far as what's coming back or what's coming in. I go grab my Yelp stuff, and then I've got another step to kind of parse out the JSON results that come back. You may not need this anymore. So I built this 100 years ago, when Flow wasn't as good as handling JSON and stuff coming back. And they've actually cleaned up a lot of stuff. So I bet if I go back and rebuild this, sorry, I keep hitting the mic, um, it may be a lot cleaner. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm parsing out the JSON so that I can grab the name, and then I'm grabbing just the first result to make sure that I don't have an array when I send it back rather than a loop. Again, I built this thing a long time ago when I didn't know a ton of stuff. And so that's why, this stuff that is broken out into multiple steps can actually probably be done in single steps now that I know a little bit more about what I'm doing. And then you can see that I'm sending a response back to Power Virtual Agents, and I'm using the schema that's a real simple JSON that is just the restaurant name and output, right, of this compose right here, which is the first of the names that I sent back. And so going back to my Power Virtual Agent on the topic and the authoring canvas, we can see that, outside of the stuff that I did to kind of mess things up, it goes and grabs stuff, and then Power Automate Outputs gives you a value to restaurant name. And then all I did was drop that inside a message. Remember, a message is a one-way thing that basically says, here's something. I'm not waiting for a response. Here's this thing, right? And I put that there, and then I just said, that's the end of the conversation. and then that's why you see the end of conversation bit, which is, I think, one of the other ones here. So here it's one of those default 8 that we talked about, and it basically runs you through a how did we do kind of thing. So did it answer your question? And then you have the idea, yes or no. So, or in this case, true or false. And then we end up with these redirects based on that. So there's a lot of capability to do a lot of different things. Here's that switch I was telling you about as far as tracking between topics. So that would, in theory, let me pass information from my topic of eat like Ed over to my topic of weather. Once I got that working, and then that way it would be a better user experience, right? Again, a lot of this stuff without a ton of code. Yeah, there was some JSON stuff built in there, but I'm thinking like if I went back and rebuilt some of that stuff, probably wouldn't need it as much anymore, right? And then I can also see some of the analytics to see how we're doing. Neighbor's dog is going a little while, and you can see that it's using Power BI for this stuff. There won't be a ton of data for it to show because obviously I haven't been touching this for a long time, and then all of a sudden, I've got some volume there, right? But you can see the types of things, the type of information that you can get, and how good your bot is performing, and then you can make changes based on that. Okay. I think this is overall bot analytics. And this is, this is just straight. Yeah, here we go. So you can see all the different things that go along with that. Any question on that? Super high level. I get it. I totally understand. But the intent was really to get everybody kind of excited enough to go in there and realize, hey, this isn't as hard. I mean, honestly, if I can do this after the day I've had, even to the degree that I have done it, right? Because there were a couple of things that went sideways. Then there's a good chance that you, with a concerted effort, could probably do the really awesome things with this, right? So let me throw up this other slide. We got other questions or no? We're still good?
There's one question. I'm trying to do a little bit of research from Pradham again. Is it possible to embed adaptive cards within PVA response so there is a neatly formatted card rather than plain text or button response?
Great question, and the short answer, as far as I know, is no. And that's only because a good friend of mine was trying to do exactly that and wasn't able to. However, experiment with it, right? So what I ran into when I tried to do this is I did some, I tried some tricks where I put the JSON from an adaptive card inside the response, and all it did was kind of throw it up as text. Like it just keeps trying to format it as text and not necessarily recognizing it as code. So I think the short version is no on that, but I'm absolutely open to being wrong. It has happened before. Okay.
Good. Yeah, that's the only question I saw. Thank you.
Okay. And so here's some more references. Here you can see the shiny new QR code for the Microsoft Power Virtual Agent docs. And then I also threw in another one, which is that third-party tool that I used before, which is called AtBot. Great folks over there. I try and give them a shout out wherever I can because when I first got into chatbots, that's where I was living because this was, in fact, Bastion, I don't think you guys were at the was it Joe Dunn's Microsoft Expo that happened like a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, Greg might have been around, but I wasn't.
Yeah, so I think it was either 2019 or 2018, and I had just like kind of gotten my arms around chatbots from the AtBot side and having that natural language stuff, and I was all excited and, really kind of chomping at the bit to share some of this stuff. And so I had done this presentation one time before. Joe asked me to present it up here in Portland. This is before I was living here. And I'm going to present it. And then 2 weeks before the MTX, I think it was Ignite or something like that, they announced Power Virtual Agents. And so I had to completely within a week or so revamp the whole presentation to include Power Virtual Agents, because I can't be at a Microsoft Technology Expo talking about chatbots and not talk about the thing that just came out, right? So what I did do here is I linked back to the original version, which is the AtBot, which has the Lewis, the Microsoft natural language stuff on top of that. Okay. So here's some stuff to get a hold of me. You can send me an email at g@flyingpolymath. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram if you want to see kitten pictures at powered by at G. Find me on LinkedIn, please, Ed Gonzalez, and then obviously my website at flyingpolymath.com. If you have a moment, I'd appreciate you letting me know what you thought. The QR code is for a survey. Let me know, how I did. That kind of tells me how I can shape this thing for next time, which, by the way, next time is tomorrow. And for another user group, I'm kind of presenting the same thing. So I've got a chance to get some more ducks in a row, figure out the weather thing, and send that out to you guys, and then also hopefully have that working by tomorrow. So thanks for being my guinea pigs on that. Appreciate it. That's it. That's all I got.
Very cool. Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, my pleasure.
For those that are all on, how about we give Ed a round of applause?
Yay!
Yay, me.